Hey guys, today we'll be learning about list comprehension in Python. So what is it? List comprehension is syntax sugar for Python, which basically means it's a shortcut. It provides an easy and readable, yet very powerful way to create lists. So let's see how we can make these. So the format for list comprehension would be you start with what you want to do with the item, and then you do that for every of that item in subtype of iterable, which is usually a list, and you wrap that around with brackets. So that's pretty technical. So what does that actually mean? Let's dive into an example to see how we can do that. So let's say we have a list of numbers 1 through 10, and we wanted to square all the elements. Let's start off with creating a new variable where we call it numbers squared. So we start off, as we saw above, we start off with the brackets, and then what do we want to do for every number within this list? So let's name what we want to do number. We just have a number variable which will represent every single number within this list. So what do we want to do with that? We want to square it. And to square in Python, you just have two asterisks, and to square it, we just do the 2. So we have this here. We're squaring some variable of number, but we have to define that. So that's what we do right after here. We do for every number in numbers. So what this does is that it takes every number in numbers, so 1, 2, 3, and so on, and then it squares it. So let's print out the list and see what that prints out for us. As you can see, we have 1, 4, 9, 16, and so on, which are the squares of this number. As you can see, this syntax is very similar to how we create for loops, right? We can do for number in numbers and do something with those numbers. So that's what we do here. We loop through all the numbers, and then for every number, we square it. And that's how you can apply an expression across a whole list. So let's do another common use case for list comprehensions when we want to filter something out. We'll keep that there and remove the printing statement. So let's say we want to find all the odd numbers. And to find an odd number, you just get the number, you get the remainder after dividing by 2. And you do that with the modulo. And if it's equal to 0, it is even. And if it's not equal to 0, it is odd. So knowing that, we can create a new list, numbers, and we'll name it numbers odd. So let's start a new list comprehension. So we want number, but we don't want to do anything to it. So we'll just leave number for right there. And then for number in numbers. So right now, we just copy the whole list. All we're doing is looping through all the numbers and just putting in number for it, which is the same thing. But the powerful thing about list comprehensions is now you can add conditionals. So you start off a conditional with if, of course. So we put number in for every number. So we put number in for every number in numbers if the number modulo, the remainder of number after dividing 2, is not equal to 0. So this checks if it's odd. So essentially what this list comprehension is saying is that for every number in numbers, we check if it's odd, and if it is odd, we just add it. But if it's not odd, it just skips over that number. So let's try printing out numbers odd. As you can see, we have all the odd numbers here, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So that's another very common way of using list comprehension. We reduce a list. We tone it down by using some type of check. So let's move on to more complex examples. We will try reducing the number array that we have up here and checking if it is a prime number. So checking for a prime is slightly more complicated than checking if it's just odd. So we have to create a function for this. And that's why list comprehension is very powerful. We can put in functions to check for some type of condition rather than pasting this whole thing into here, which would be very messy and kind of counterintuitive. So we have numbers, we'll just name it numbers prime, and we'll set that equal to a new list comprehension. We want the number. We don't want to do anything to it, so we leave that for every number in numbers. But now we want to check if it's prime. We can just do prime check, which we defined up here. This just checks for the prime number. And we want to check prime check every number. So this function right here returns false if it's a non-prime, and it returns true if it is prime. So now that we know that that function does that, we can predict that this list comprehension will give us all the prime numbers from the original list we had, which was 1 through 10. So let's see if it does that. We will print out numbers prime. So here we have 2, 3, 5, and 7, which are all prime. And that's why list comprehension can be so powerful. Let's say if we had something a lot more complicated than that, like 10 or so lines, it would be very cumbersome to put it all in the if statement at the end of this list comprehension. Instead, we can abstract it and put it into a function, which makes it a lot more understandable, readable, and just nicer looking. Okay, so let's say we wanted to use a function to do something with the number. So let's say I want, for every number, I want it to be this mystery output, which I just get the remainder after dividing by 5 and times 2. This is kind of arbitrary, but this just, I want to do something with the number. We can actually apply this function we have here across the entire list. So let's try doing that. Let's name a new list. We'll call it numbers mystery. And we can start the list comprehension with a bracket, and then we say, for every number, I want to apply this mystery function onto it, right? We pass in the number into this mystery function. And we want to do that for every number in numbers. So as you can see, for every numbers in numbers, I want that number to be passed into this mystery function, which returns this. And when we print that out, we can see that we have this pattern forming because we use the remainder function, or the remainder operator. And this pattern starts forming. You can see that I've applied this special function across the whole list. And you can imagine, this is only one line. I could have just put it down here. But what if you had like 10 lines of code and you needed to do it to everything in the list? List comprehension would be very powerful, and it'd be a lot cleaner than just doing a for loop, and you'd have to for loop using like the indexes and set the indexes. It'd be a lot more complicated. This is a lot cleaner, more readable, and just what we call Pythonic. It's like the Python way. Okay, so let's do something a bit more complicated. Let's say we want to make more advanced object types with every element. So we have this list of names. They're strings, and they're not spaced, like the names are separated by spaces here. So we have James Smith, Jacob Legg, so on. And let's say we want to separate it, but we also want to make a dictionary for every person. So let's see how we would go about doing that. So let's say we have a list of people. Let's just say people. We have a new variable called people. We start a new list comprehension. And let's say for every name within names, we want to create a new dictionary object where there's a first name and there's a last name, right? And so how do we go about basically creating a dictionary with the first and last name? Let's get back to that later and say we want to loop through every name. So for name in names. So we know that we loop through all the names here. So how do we go about making this object? We can actually do the name and then we split it. When we do split, by default, it splits it by spaces. And after splitting it by spaces, we can see we can grab the first element to get the first name. So we do the 0 element here, and then we can do the same over by the last name, but instead of grabbing the first element, we can grab the second element. So here, we create a more advanced item type, which is a dictionary, and place it inside this list for every name in names. So let's try printing that out. So we print out all the people. As you can see here, we have a list of these dictionaries, which contains the first name and the last name. And just to see how this can be helpful, we can call up people, and let's say we want the first person and we want their last name. So we can do that and play that. See, we have Smith, which the first person and their last name is Smith. So you can see that can be very powerful with trying to clean up data or trying to manipulate data so that it's easier for people to search with. Okay, so let's combine everything we've learned so far and kind of do a really practical example how we could use this list comprehension in the real world. So here I have a list of dictionaries that contain information about a lot of the Spider-Man movies. So let's see, we have a name for every movie. This one would be Spider-Man. We have a rating out of 10, and we have 7.3 out of 10. And we have the year it was released in. We have this list of information. And let's say somebody wanted us to make it human readable. If we were to print out this movies variable, which we assigned up here, it'd be very messy. Let's check it out. This isn't that readable. So let's say we wanted it so somebody could easily read it after they print it out. So let's start out with making a new list. We can make, let's say, movies info, right? After that, we can make a new list comprehension. So we want to have a list of human readable strings, basically. So let's start off with an F string, a formatted string. We don't really know what to do yet, so let's put what we know we need for movie in movies. So right now, we're looping through every movie dictionary object here. So we get this movie, this movie, this movie, and then what we want to do is figure out a way to make it really readable for a human. So let's start off with the name of the movie. So since we have the dictionary object, we can just call it within these brackets here, because this we can put it in variables when we have a formatted string. So we want the movie, and then we want the name of it. So we'll just put name in there. Remember, when you're calling something within a dictionary, you have to put that in a string, and I put it in there. So we have the movie name. And then we can say the movie was made in, let's say it was made in a certain year, so we put the year there, and then, and was rated, we can just put the rating there, which is right here, rating out of 10. So what this will do is, for every movie in movies, it makes this string out of it. So we have an F string that contains the movie name, was made in the year, and was rated something out of 10. Let's just clean this code up a little bit. We'll just indent it so it just looks slightly less messy. Okay, so now we use this list comprehension to create a bunch of strings, and the cool thing is we can now just, let's actually do, for every info in movies info, we'll just print out the info. And now let's try running this. As you can see, we have this really nicely formatted string that somebody could read from this information that was not really readable before. As you can see, we have here the movie name, then was made in 2002, which we inserted the year, and was rated something out of 10, 7.3 out of 10. So yeah, you can see this is a very powerful tool to create lists easily, and you can see here it's very clean. There's only, it could have been only one line of code, but you can see here I just wanted to make it a little more legible, and it's just 4 lines of code, very easy. And then if you wanted to, you can also do if movie, and then make the rating is greater than 7. So what this does is now it filters out every movie that is basically less than 7. The rating has to be greater than 7. So if we run that again, we can see Spider-Man 3, which is at 6.2, was kicked out of the list because its rating is not greater than 7. So you can see here that list comprehensions are a really powerful way to create lists that are easy, readable, and just overall probably the best way of making lists in Python. And I hope you learned a lot on how to create list comprehensions. Thank you for watching.